sales is always going to be the first thing that drops off.
Welcome to the Redefining Sales podcast. Today we have with us Regan Barker, who is Head of Revenue Operations from Grant Thornton. I am so excited for this one. Regan is that person who always has her finger on the pulse. She's always testing and trying and learning and reading, and she is that person that you want to have in your network. And I cannot wait for you to listen to this. So Regan and I are going to be talking about how do you build sales enablement? How do you build sales capability? How do you build out a sales process, sales structure, sales methodology in your business? Now, whilst Regan's level of expertise is around professional services, and we target the conversation around some of the nuances with professional services, any business right now who is actually looking to lift up and elevate your sales capability, honestly, you can actually really apply so many of the steps that Regan unpacks with us. There are so many practical takeaways in this conversation. Regan talks about how does she work with mindset? How does she then develop skill set? How does she then develop tool set and some of the tech that people need? And then how does she make it highly practical so that you can actually see great success? Regan is so honest, and that's what I love about this conversation and about Regan all up. So if you have not come across Regan before, make sure you connect with her on LinkedIn because she shares lots of really cool stuff and insights. So Regan, as I said, is Head of Revenue Operations at Grant Thornton. If you have not come across Grant Thornton, they're one of the world's leading independent assurance, tax and advisory firms. Prior to being head of RevOps, which is a relatively new promotion for Regan, she was head of client relationships and sales enablement. She's previously been in sales roles herself in senior client manager roles. Before that, she spent time at Westpac. Before that, she was at a couple different law firms, including Allen's. So she has so much experience to offer from, professional services with the likes of accounting, with law, with banking, and just one of those knowledgeable people. So grab your pad and your pen and get ready to tune into this conversation. Regan, welcome to the Redefining Sales podcast. I am so excited to have you on. We've been talking about this for ages, and I'm so excited to have this conversation today.
Oh, likewise. It's funny. I wish we've kind of recorded some of our previous conversations because we can always go down rabbit holes of between sales and books and you name it. I think I love our conversation. So thanks for having me.
Do you know, I came across someone who did that as a podcast. They would just record like the conversation they were kind of having anyway. And I actually think, we cover a lot of ground on our conversation. So this one's going to be fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, that's right.
One of the starting points that I wanted to lead with is around sales for professional services, because I think so much of the information out there or the conversations out there around sales are for BDMs, sales professionals. But I'm really I want to tap into your brain and your years of expertise around, but how do we apply that professional services? If it's, accountants, lawyers, whoever it might be, who, heaven forbid, we should remotely allude to the fact that they are also part of the sales profession. And I think it's a very different story and a very different approach. So I guess if I kind of start out broad, what's your take on, how we start to approach sales when it comes to professional services?
Yeah. Okay. So what I would probably acknowledge first, professional services, you've got your engineering consultants, accountants, lawyers, you name it, all based on time and expertise, right? And with it, what strategies have been applied in the past from what I'm aware of, particularly in Australia? There is key account management, business development more broadly. You would have ABM programs, not necessarily though any, sales methodology or even, your sales stages. So, or sales life cycle, I'd say. What I'm seeing at the moment is that there's probably a handful of accounting firms, and I know at least one law firm that has a sales cycle that they're starting to bring to life. So I see there's like a huge gap in sales capability, particularly because at the moment we're seeing more buyers come into a buying party. Procurement is tightening. There's less loyalty around B2B more broadly, and this is also coming through in professional services. There needs to be this application now of smart selling, and that combination, which I know that you speak of a lot of the time, is around that marketing piece. So making sure your marketing and your sales actually, merge as one. To make sure that you're being efficient, you're tailored, you're going after the right clients, you're making sure it's profitable work. And some of these things are done in pockets in certain firms, but not end to end. And so I see this huge opportunity across all, I guess, professional services to become this additional layer of or apply an additional layer of maturity. With it, what we're seeing as well is that at least from my experience, accountants have been more open to the idea where, say, lawyers are not so much. So I know that there's pockets that are starting to make the shift, but what I would love to see is an industry start to shift towards more sales capability.
Do you think that some of the challenge, and this is certainly one element of what I've seen, is around that mindset? And I put this in sort of a couple compartments. One is it's not my job. I didn't go to law school to then become a seller. So there's an element of it's not my job as an example. Sorry, I'm picking on lawyers. And then the other element is I still think, even though we're 2024, there is still a perception that sales is used car salesman, being salesy, and a perception. So do you think that overall one of the barriers to this sort of successfully happen and your vision coming to life is actually how do we change the mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's definitely a part of it. You have in there that, I know that that's how it's done in B2B, but professional services is different. And I think that whole professional services is different piece, and I'm probably going to offend a few people here, but no, professional services is lagging, because if you think about, if time is the biggest element of professional services and you're not using sales capability successfully and efficiently, or have the confidence to own that part of your role, then there's huge room for improvement. What I also find is that because if you're a technical expert, there is a perception in pockets, not all across the whole industry, but definitely in pockets where, how would you know you're not a technical expert? You're not a lawyer. And it's like, no, I'm not. I studied it for a bit, got bored, and for some reason went into sales. But what I find is that, the legal piece happens from, your discovery through to close, and then obviously advising on the work. But there's a huge prospecting piece that, there's opportunity for improvement as well. What the other piece is that, yes, like you said, like the sales is a bit of a dirty word, is that we almost need to, I guess, redefine what is car salesman or woman, and then also what is like the pitch slap, like what is lazy sales versus what is selling and buying in 2024. And I think that they're two completely different things. And so if you're looking to be successful in selling services, you need to be able to understand your buyer journey, have a truly developed ideal client profile, have a strict methodology, whether it's consultative selling or whatever. You need to be able to know this because, competition is like so much more prominent now, that if you don't have this, you're just wasting your own time and potentially your, future clients as well.
Yeah. And I'm a massive fan of, it's like the classic Zig Ziglar, like everyone's in sales. If you're touching the customer, you're speaking to the customer, everyone's in sales. And I think it is so true. Like we did some work years ago with some lawyers, and the lawyers were doing the free consults and they were doing that initial part of it. It is then going, well, how are we kind of making that part of the sales process work? You are still in that essence acting in sales. And I guess I'm curious on that. Is part of it also, you mentioned before when you were saying about professional services being different, and I want to kind of unpack some of those elements. But one element, is the classic, your time and billing, and I think most lawyers are like 6-minute increments, and a lot of professional services have certainly got people have got targets to hit. We've worked with some. We worked with a creative agency, and they had targets to hit around their utilization rates and their billable hours. And so it was creating a conflict between, what they were trying to ask people to do around proactive sales versus their billable time. So have you found a bit of an answer? Have you found the silver bullet to solve that one, as well as world peace?
I think I'd more likely solve world peace, to be honest. But look, I think that there's a lot there to unpack, right? So yes, as much as firms try to move away from, there is still the billable hour utilization, profitability. You have to look at like everyone has a certain level of WIP, and whether or not that's billed to the client. And then, if things like blow out of scope and whatnot, if, then there's scope creep, all of these different things that happen within, within the professional services sphere, and they apply across, all professional services to a degree as well. But with that, I think because of, they do have to bill a certain amount, and let's just cover off at a partner level, right? Of, that top level decision maker within a professional services firm, is that because they are working on the billing, working on educating their teams, delivering, client and key account management, as well as being the technical experts, they're constantly at this challenge of, what to prioritize. Sales is always going to be the first thing that drops off. Now, because naturally a lot of the people in professional services being technical experts, there is a huge amount of introverts in there that aren't necessarily comfortable going out and being a hunter, if you were to consider them salespeople. So, that's always going to drop in priority over client delivery. And you know what, to a certain degree, you should always prioritize your client. You would always prioritize your client as well, right? But it also means that we need to be smarter in the way that we operate, and whether or not that is through a combination of technology, time blocking, really good behaviors. What I find with a lot of the people that I coach in professional services is that if they get a 15-minute gap and they're like, right, I'm going to do some BD, they'll sit down at the computer, they might open LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and they're like, where do I start? So unless they have that true plan of like, right, these are the actions that I need to do, here's my cadence, here's the people that I'm trying to nurture, these are the people that I need to have like a human connection with, so a phone call or a coffee or whatever, is that unless you have that written down somewhere and those actions, you're not going to use that 15 minutes correctly as well. Whereas like if I know that as a technical expert, I need to do this one piece of work for my client, I know exactly how to do that. We need that same technical overlay on the sales side of our partners' days as well. So how do we do that? We need to make sure that we understand their day. We need to understand how to actually put, sales into their day, and to also give them the confidence in doing it as well. And that happens at a essentially a mindset, skill set, and tool set perspective.
I love that. I'm writing that down because I'm like, right, we're going to unpack those. Too many questions now. We need another 5 hours. And it's interesting you said about that barrier with that 15 minutes. Like, I agree with you. We see the most success of, if you say to someone, go run a marathon, and they've never run 1K, it's too big. So saying to someone, go spend the next 2 hours or 1 hour prospecting, it's too big. But if you say, look, in 15 minutes, what could you do? Could you do one proactive thing or two proactive things? I actually am going to go really old school on you, which is quite funny because we are going to talk about technology. We've actually seen a lot of success with people who go, same as you, you've got the initial barrier when you sit down of like, I need to spend this 15 minutes being proactive. What shall I do? By the time you decide what to do, your 15 minutes is gone. We had a client who actually, we created a cheat sheet with them of like, here's the 5 or 6 different proactive things that you could do with that time that would move the needle and contribute towards proactive sales. Printed off. And at their desk, they laminated it. This is how technical I'm going on you. They laminated it and put it on their desk. And it worked a treat because it was about exactly what you're talking about. How do you remove the barrier from making that happen? And one of the barriers is, I got no inspiration here.
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes old school isn't a bad thing. Like, I think that sometimes we almost forget that, sometimes those classic sales and BD activities of connecting with someone or making sure that someone knows we're thinking of them, sending an insight, those things matter. There is a Forrester study done a few years ago, and we always talk about it here at GT about that human versus non-human element. Get your non-human part up and running with digital marketing, and make sure it's aligned to what your end goal is. But then you're the one who adds the human element. So as much as you can create meaningful touch points with your clients, with your prospects, led by insights, like that is actually sales, which ultimately, like even professional services, you have to be insight led.
Yes, that's so interesting. So if I break down your, if we sort of go, okay, well, cool. If anyone's listening who is from professional services and going, okay, cool, I'm inspired and motivated here that there's an opportunity. How do I build sales capability here? You've talked about, having a methodology and having a strong process. And you also just talked there about almost looking at, what's the mindset, what's the skill set, what's the tool set. We kind of break that down. On the mindset piece, and you just said just then as well, sometimes it's confidence. How do you find it's the most effective way to overcome the mindset barrier first? Because I do think that's first, because if the mindset isn't there, you can build all the skill set and tool set and tech and anything as you like. Doesn't matter, the mindset's wrong. It's not going to happen.
100%. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I do think that you do have to start with the mindset first. There are people out there, and I've worked with this one partner, and I will give a shout out to Himi because I absolutely adore this woman. If she was put in a room full like of 1,000 people, she'd be like, "Oh my God, yes, I get to meet new people. This is amazing. I'm ready to just have a chat." Not everyone is a Himi. And so if people are nervous to even make a digital connection on LinkedIn, if people are nervous about networking, if people are nervous around sending an email, you have to start with the mindset, because that action will never happen. There will always be a level of avoidance, or I'll prioritize something else, right? So to overcome that, there's a few things that you can do. Like one-to-one coaching, obviously, is a bit more personal, but like with what we do at GT, if we were to do like our 2-day sales training, the first thing we do is actually just write on the board, just ask everyone, what are your biggest like roadblocks, challenges, fears around sales? Like, let's just put it out there. And so acknowledging what is actually going to scare you the most, and then being able to, throughout the next 2 days, tackle each one with a skill. It shows then, it almost works like hand in hand, is that acknowledging the fear, but then learning the skill to overcome it. The mindset skill set kind of work really well together. And it comes back to that saying about what is it? Competence breeds confidence. So as long as you know that you are confident or competent in a particular action, then you will have the confidence to do it. And it's like, okay, I now understand the LinkedIn platform. I understand the meaning behind connecting with someone and nurturing them and sharing insights. Therefore, I know that my intent is good. I'm going to now able to connect with them and then share an insight, have a conversation. As long as you can make it, I guess, simple. Like, I don't think sales needs to be complex, but I don't think it needs to be just transactional either. There has to be this, element of, if with B2B, once you get to say a point of sale, you hand it over, right? You hand it over to an account exec. You end up moving to a team that's going to implement, some sort of software that you've just purchased or whatever. With professional services, you are working with the human the whole way through. So you need to make sure that you like the person that you're going to deal with. There is like a level of trust. You have to lower tension along the way. You have to create value. So that happens over time. So as long as you don't rush it, and as long as you lead with good intention, you ask the right questions, you understand the client, and then also guide them through that buying journey, I think it makes a huge difference. So as long as our professional services partners, for example, breaks down that skill set, they will get that mindset as well. And then making sure that, they feel like they have overcome those fears. And once you overcome it, once you start practicing, it becomes second nature, right? You can just get better and better and more efficient, and improve your quality and whatnot as well.
Yeah, and I love what you're sort of doing there is you're making something that might have seemed at the start, they said, of fear and all the different fears and complex, to you're actually just making it so simple for people. And I think that's the key, is otherwise no one's going to be able to walk out that room and execute. No one's going to be able to go do it. Something I love doing as well is sort of almost reframing. If you think about, you had a plumber standing here and there's a leak in the roof. You don't want the plumber to just completely ignore it and be like, well, I didn't want to say anything about your leak in the roof because I didn't want to appear salesy. And that's typically one of the objections I hear, is I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to appear salesy. I reframe it and go, well, an epic client experience, I would expect if there was a plumber standing there and they saw a bit of a leak, they'd go, hey, I'm just wondering, have you ever thought about getting that leak looked at? Is that something that's on your radar at the moment? And I would view that as really good client experience, and reframing it as
100%.
asking one question, one extra question can lead, us into a great conversation. And it's coming from a perspective of, well, as an expert, which professional services, they are experts, I would expect you to ask me that question about it.
It's so true, absolutely. And I think that having the bravery around to raise those things and to challenge. I mean, if they read say the Challenger sale, they'd probably understand that that's what the really high performers in professional services are doing quite naturally anyway. So I think that if they do have the confidence for that, absolutely, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think you gave a couple examples around partners, and you've said that there's something that I'm observing as well, is that more partners are being enabled around sales, because there's this almost career progression of, if you're on the pathway to becoming a partner, we actually expect you to have this skill set. So I think that's interesting as well, around going, well, how do you actually develop that skill set earlier on into your career as well? So you don't then suddenly get the culture shock to go, oh gosh, I'm trying to make it to partner, and actually, as well as all the other capabilities I have to demonstrate and so on, I also have to develop my skill set around sales. Is there something you're seeing there around sales skill set to go on your partner pathway?
Look, well, it's something that we've just actually built out, and Vanessa in my team has done an incredible job at this as well, is that we'd found that a few years ago, when presenting to the directors, so the layer below partner, is that we were running training that was demystifying business development and sales. Now, if we're demystifying it at the second layer down, we have a concern. So we've extended this full program into director, manager, and then also drip feeding more appropriate stuff to, I guess, associate up to senior associate levels, to get them more exposure earlier on. And this might be through, we do monthly trainings. We give them access to LinkedIn Sales Navigator, so they get access earlier. They can do a lot of the research or help support research for clients and partners. So I think just extending that, so they're not hitting that level and being like, oh my gosh, now I have to learn how to build a book, is that they're learning that, and they're a part of that journey. They're shadowing partners that they've worked with on the technical side, but now on the sales side as well. So learning really good behaviors really early on makes a huge difference. You can see those that have that natural confidence already, or that want to give it a crack, that if I ask them if they wanted to be partnered, they're like, absolutely, and I know I need to learn this early. So I think these younger generations know it. And I also think that what's happening is that because I guess sales and buying is changing so drastically, and we're seeing this in terms of how many generations are in a buying party, and the use of, in terms of Gen Z and millennials and how they buy differently, is that they need to also learn on the other side how to sell differently as well. So they're adopting this a lot quicker, and I guess I wouldn't say easier, but maybe they've just got the mindset for it to be able to accept what sales should be for them in the future. So if I was working in any other professional services firm right now and wanting to apply a level of sales maturity onto professional services. Start with your younger partners, start with the younger teams, and go down into a vertical rather than a horizontal layer of partnership. Because if you can do it in one pocket, create a pilot in professional services, we love a pilot. And then you can extend the program out, because people will be like, oh, I want what that partner's doing, or I want what that team is doing. So create that level of fear of missing out. Because I think that if you have that and create a success story, it will give you so much, or such a better platform going forward as well. Whereas if you start with, say, your more senior statesman style partners, they're not necessarily going to change. They've got great networks. They've built up the relationships over many, many years. They probably don't need to change. It's like, how do we enable that next generation coming up to have just as much success?
Yeah, and I 1,000,000% agree with you. Once you create that level of, you've got your early adopters, you create that bit of FOMO because it's kind of where all the action's at and so on. I've actually found you then, exactly what you're saying, you can then get some of those people who have been doing it a little bit longer and, like I said, don't necessarily need to change, but start going, hang on, what's going on over here? And then want to jump on board. So yeah, I love that. So you talked about mindset. I've got so many different notes with you. This is horrific. Too many topics I want to talk about all at once. So you talked about mindset, and then you talked about linking that to skill set. As sort of comes next. How would you approach building skill set? Because what I would also assume is a consideration, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I would assume is consideration is you've also got to be quite efficient on how you build that skill set, because time is money. And if you're taking, you talked about 2-day workshop, you also have given references of small continuous learning and ongoing to really embed. You talked about coaching, but there's also that consideration of, someone might be going, oh my God, if I take people off the floor for 2 days, not floor, but billable hours for 2 days, that's going to be quite the price tag. So how do you approach skill set in terms of some of the barriers, but also what are the most effective and efficient ways to build skill set?
Yeah, and look, we've tested a few different things, some that have worked for a small pocket, and then others that have other ways that have worked for, I guess, the majority. We have done online training in an hour each week or fortnight or whatever. People generally cancel because it ends up being part of the workday. It's busy. Not everyone, as many people that could attend would. But what I found was with the 2-day session, you are time blocked dedicated to those 2 days. So obviously partners nip in and out to make sure that they're prioritizing their team and their clients. But what I found with that is that training has to be practical. And this is a gap as well, again, probably offending professional services here, is that I found in terms of a lot of traditional business development coaching, it becomes very theoretical. What I'm doing is I'm trying to make sure that this is anti-rocket science. It is the most basic things. When I'm talking about sales, I am saying step 1, do this, step 2, do this. I will walk alongside you. In fact, a lot of the learnings and testings that we do are actually based off of our inbound process, which my team runs. Max in my team owns it, and he does an incredible job. But it means that we actually run the sales process alongside the partner when it gets to discovery. But we qualify or pre-qualify it first, and we make sure that we run a coach to close process, essentially. So when we're working with the partners, we will coach them on a live deal. Send this email. We should really double check this with them. We should send this insight. We should connect with them on here. So as much as we can, we make sure that we help guide on those additional touch points. But then going back to the sales training, it has to be practical. So we're sitting there for 2 days, going on stalled deals. How do you revive a stalled deal without a just following up? How do you make sure that you reach out and start creating meaningful connections through multi-channel and multi-threading? We do it by sitting in a room, helping them craft messages, helping them understand what a cadence is, and building out their cadences. So by the time they leave the room after 2 days, they've refreshed their ideal clients, revived a few deals. We've made sure that they have reached out and started connecting with their ideal clients and their buyer personas. And we make sure that they have messages to commit to a first meeting, and we've refreshed, what you should be covering off in that first meeting and how to create, meaningful conversations through powerful and thoughtful questions. So, when you're going out of a room like that, that's your skill set, and you've just, crossed off every one of your fears and challenges on that whiteboard. So there's your mindset. And because we've been using the tools within that 2 days, there's your tool set as well. So it's all wrapped up into one. So it's essentially like, kill the theory, make it practical, essentially.
I love that. And I think, like, last time I checked, it was something like you forget 90% of what you learn within a week unless you apply it. And I agree with you. It's got to be highly practical. Otherwise, it's that, level of someone sitting there being like, well, I don't see how this relates to my job, or, oh, I don't think I could do that. And like I said, if you've then got people doing it, it goes back to your earlier point, which is they're then going to get the confidence, A, because they've started doing it and acting it in the room, and then B, because they've got their kit bag with, here's my template, here's my message, here's my cadence, here's my, everything, which breeds the confidence, which is back to your, earlier point and barrier. So I love everything you're saying there.
And it's not like they can, it's not like it can drop off, because if someone that they've connected with is actually coming back and being like, yes, I'd love to have a meeting, it just means that you have to action it again, and so on.
Yeah.
So, look, like, have we got it right? And I still think that there's always room for improvement. And this is obviously, year 2 of us building out this program. There's still so much opportunity like that. We can constantly improve. But what we're finding is that it is creating a difference, and like the whole team, the whole MCBD or marketing communications business development team are involved in this, and seeing them add value through different lenses, whether it's from a campaign perspective, business development, proposals, communicate, you name it. Like, the whole team is creating wonderful impact on this. It's not just me and my little team either, which is great.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, because back to the earlier point is that everybody is on the bus. Everyone plays a part.
Yeah.
You might all contribute slightly different parts, but every single person is involved in actually the growth, the success, the business development.
Absolutely.
I love that. Yeah. And so then you talked about toolset being the final one. You've kind of already given a few sort of inklings towards toolset, whether it's actually just having your message templates and sort of basics like that, or you've talked about arming the team with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Talk to us about toolset. What do you see as sort of essential as being in that bucket?
Oh, well, I think that there's what we have versus what other firms have as well, and each would obviously have a different strategy around what the technology side of what's in that tool set. Now, in professional services, a lot of them do not prioritize a CRM, which to me is like, I don't even know. It hurts my heart. The fact that there's no priority around tech, it does hurt my heart. So, for all the partners out there that are listening to this, like, push for a CRM, push for a proper tech stack, because it will help save you time. It will help reduce risk around conflict checks and confidential matters, like, you name it. It will help if you build out your CRM as a proper sales tool, not as a address book. That should be number one, and it should have essentially a sales cycle applied to it. Then integrate with your tools from your digital marketing, so you can see end to end what your clients are, subscribing to and what they're looking at, to then be able to create meaningful connections and conversations with them, led by insights. And then number 3, get Sales Navigator. It saves so much time, in a market that uses LinkedIn Sales Navigator so much in Australia. You need to have it. Like, you are doing your firm and yourself a disservice if you don't have it. So I would focus that on the tech side to start off with. And then in terms of your tool set as well, beyond that, it's like, instead of recreating emails constantly, develop the suite of them that you know is going to happen aligned to your sales cycle. So from your introductory, insight-led to, your collaboration emails after a scoping or discovery call, to how you revive stalled deals, creating meaningful touch points, like booking meetings, agendas, whatever it might be. Build those up so you're not recreating the wheel. That saves you so much time. And then I think apart from that, it would probably be making sure that you're not recreating insights for insight's sake. So leverage as much of your marketing, insights for your entire ideal client. It doesn't mean that for professional services, if you are in one area of law, whether it's like private equity or M&A or whatever it might be, or, if you're in tax, in accounting, you don't just need to send them insights on that. They are a whole client with a range of concerns. Leverage your colleagues' insights and making sure that you're educating your clients on like the whole suite of things that concerns them, not just your area. So that'd probably be my top ones.
I almost want to applause and be like, yeah. I'm 1,000,000% the same as you. I think it's borderline impossible to do some of what you and I do without having a CRM in place. And, it's just the foundation. It's like the foundations of a house. If you don't have that there, it's going to be pretty shaky. I agree with you. I always have to be like, I'm not sponsored by LinkedIn, but I feel like I should be. And I say, I find
I'm not either, but I love it.
We'll just start our own little fan club, just you and I.
Yeah,
we'll start
exactly.
out and see how many people we get on
That's
board.
right.
But I agree, and I love it because I'll tell you why I love it. It makes my life easier to do what I need to do.
Yeah.
Even down to, since they brought in Account IQ, which for anyone who's not familiar, is their latest sort of AI answer to getting insights on a company. So I could look up a company. So say LinkedIn, I want to approach LinkedIn and I want to look at them, and I can use Account IQ to get the key insights on what are their business priorities, what are their business challenges, who are the key stakeholders, have they been in the news, what's happening with their business, those sorts of things. And then you can create a personalized response. That process, I used to enable people, 18 months, 2 years ago, before it existed and before AI existed. That process would take you bloody ages. And so people wouldn't do it because it was too hard. And now I think that, you can do that new connection or new stakeholder or personalized outreach or getting the insights so much easier with that sort of text. I'm 1,000,000% on board with you. I'm also on board with you, the templates. I swear by them, and I will never send an email as is with the template. I do exactly that. It's your template, and then you tweak it, you personalize it. But again, the hours that you save is just unbelievable. So yeah, I'm 1,000,000% on board with your toolkit.
And look, that's just a simple toolkit, right? Like, the CRM and LinkedIn Sales Navigator, that can impact a whole firm. And to be honest, with the guys at LinkedIn, they can generate, how many hours potentially saved for a salesperson. Obviously reduced for professional services because it's not their entire day, but that in itself is a huge difference. And then on the template side, you do that with your proposals as well. And like, if you do work in 6-minute increments, like, think about all the keystrokes that saves. Like, that saves so much time, So
yeah. So we've covered sort of mindset, skill set, tool set. I do want to just pause and unpack one thing though, just in case any clarity is needed. You've referenced sort of throughout the conversation, enabling the team to have insights and generate insights. Just in case anyone's like, what 100% does she mean by insights? What's a good insight versus a bad insight? Can you give us a bit of a explanation on that?
Yeah, so when I think about insights, if I was in professional services, I would be thinking emerging needs or emerging topics or unrecognized needs. So going back to your piece around, the plumber mentioning like the leak in the roof, is that if you're a client of a professional services firm and you don't know something's on the horizon, it is the professional services expert's job to essentially give you like a heads up on that. And that's what I mean by insights. It's emerging risks, emerging opportunities, unrecognized needs, like whether it's a regulatory compliance change, we're seeing these things come up in terms of sustainability, or if you're in financial services, there's always these, applications of different CPS standards. So if you're educating your client on the things that are coming up that's going to impact their role and their, organization, that is an insight, because essentially they will need to do something with that information. They'll either need to, put someone responsible, like in charge of that, or they might need to start generating new reports, whether to a regulator or to make sure that they're set up, and prepared for the ATO. Or if they need to, from an engineering perspective, they're going to be bidding for a particular infrastructure project, and they need to ensure that they have like additional sustainability measures in place, for example. All of those things are insights to prepare your client, to prepare a buyer or prospect for what's coming as well. So like that's what I mean by those insights. And to be honest, professional services, you don't have to, create them from scratch. Like the market is telling you what's actually happening. So it's really you packaging that and as the expert, putting your lens on it and giving it to the client in the most appropriate way.
Yeah, Julie Masters, who I adore, who specializes in influence, who you're aware of, she always says, and she just puts it in the most simple way ever. She's like, still saying, "I saw this and thought of you," is
Oh,
like
yeah.
the most powerful thing
It
known
is.
to man. So that like I saw this report or this podcast or this
Yeah.
blog and I thought of you, and just going, like you said earlier, going back to the fundamental basics. And I always think of it and position it as, no one wants the friend who always turns up when they want something. You see your phone ringing and you're like, oh God, what do they want now? And you never want to be that person, that business. So how are you constantly showing up, adding value, nurturing the relationship, so you're front of mind and there when they're ready? Because you have consistently, Julie's word, not mine, out contributed and educated and provided that value. So I think it's still,
100%.
like you said, those
And
basics, but they work.
yeah, for sure. And if we look at this in terms of like, so I always think that anything, the way we buy in personal life is the way we buy in professional life, right? So we've seen B2C transform over the last few years, and that is absolutely not just trickling, but like there's a movement into B2B and professional services. So the way that we're buying in B2C, if we look at, say, any social media platform, right? You're scrolling through Instagram or whatever. Instagram will give you 3 things that you want to see, and then it's going to have an ask, which is a sponsorship. So unless you're giving first to that client, how can you, I guess, justify the right to ask for anything in return? And most of the time, what you're asking for is their time. So, like, unless you have earned the right for their time, you shouldn't be asking for it. Simple as that. And so, to essentially earn the right for their time, lead with insights.
Yeah.
Give them multiple things.
Here. I love that. I actually think one of the biggest things that I feel like we have to educate people when doing that is, yes, it is effective, but it is typically a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, 100%.
In that you're not going to get a reply from someone, and this is my British sarcasm coming in, going, thank God you sent me that blog. I've been dying to hear from you all week. Can I sign up for your services for A, B, and C? It's more that nurture, right? Then you're going to get the business. And so I find that whilst we all know, and you can look at any of the sales research that's out there right now, and it backs up what Regan's saying, that this is what high performance sellers and businesses are doing. But what it takes is the mindset shift and the tenacity, whatever the word is, I'm losing my words, to actually play the long-term game, because then people get deflated and go, well, I spent all those insight emails and I didn't get anything out of it. This didn't work.
Yeah. It's funny, there's a partner here that he won a client recently, and when he was asked how long it took him to win that client, it was 10 years.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, just imagine, 10 years of this. And, like, he is a wonderful and genuine human being that did share insights over a decade before he was able to earn the right for that work. And, whether it's like 180 days, which is probably like a standard cycle in most professional services. Or, it's a week, but you've already got the relationship developed over years. Like, you do need to make sure that you're consistent. If anything else, like, and professional services, there's peaks in time of year depending on, or depending on transactions or infrastructure projects, you name it, is that you need to make sure that consistent sales behavior is, like, even in those high peaks, a bit like those busy periods as well, to make sure that you earn the right to ask for time and then potentially win work with the prospect. Now, you're not going to win everything either, right? Some people are just going to waste your time, or that they end up you putting in all that work and then they move on and you've got to start all over again. So nothing's perfect, but if on that consistency piece is that you become better, more confident, you can ask better questions, when to take a step back or know when to call it earlier so you're not wasting time as well. So, the more you do it, I guess the smarter you are at understanding your own sales cycle as well.
I agree so much. So I'm trying to think about someone who is sitting listening, who's in professional services. What are they screaming at us right now, going, yeah, but you haven't talked about that, we're different in professional services. And one thing that keeps coming to mind for me is how do you, if you do, structure around commissions or KPIs or performance? Because typically from many professional services, it's around your utilization rate, your billable hours, your 6-minute increments if you're a lawyer or whatever it is. When it comes to business development, a lot of other industries are more commission and target based. Any considerations there for professional services?
Yeah, I would almost I would ask them a question, to be honest, and that's, what is your dream practice? So if you're in professional services, like, genuinely, what is your dream practice? Is it to work with 1,000 little clients? That means that you have to be so concerned about your acquisition cost of the client, to your utilization, to this, to that, to your billables, etc. Or are you after a practice that gives you clients that want to work with you, you want to work with them, that's recurring work where possible, and that can even apply in transactional work when you're working with private equity or things like that, or if you're working in engineering, you'll have certain clients that you'll work with or collaborate with on big projects. So what is it that you want to go after, and making sure you're going after the top of that bracket. So then, it alleviates some of the pressure around utilization, billables, profitability. Making sure you understand where your most profitable work is will help alleviate that. And then I would say that, based on your dream practice, that understanding your client as best as possible and being really strict on what that ideal client is, so then you can go find like clients. And that might mean that you have 2 or 3 ideal client profiles, but then understanding the buyers within it and how they buy, and then how you sell to guide them through that journey. It's so basic, but it's so powerful, because if these buyers are buying this thing once a year, once a decade, whatever it might be, and you're selling this day in, day out, more. So, give them the next step and the next step. So if you understand that, you will by far be in a better position in a year's time, in 2 years' time. The other piece is, say no to work that is going to put pressure around utilization, put pressure on the billing and profitability, because if you don't, that's just going to take up time that could be well spent trying to find the clients that you do want to work with. Which I know it's easier said than done, because you still need that confidence and competence piece there, but your future self will thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you end up, we worked with some immigration lawyers, and accidentally they were kind of attracting more student visas and things
Yeah.
like that. And accidentally, when we actually unpacked it, we saw what they'd been doing was sort of using words like affordable and things like that. And so, of course, you're then attracting the student visas rather than the corporates, which seems obvious in hindsight, as with every good thing. But it's
Yeah.
actually, like I said, who really is the ideal client? And if it's a, corporate who wants that top talent that they're going to bring from overseas, then actually what's the language, what's their challenges, what do we want to be saying that's going to appeal to them in the first place? So almost people are self-selecting and being like, oh yeah, they're for me, or oh no, they're not for me because I'm looking for that student visa. And then, like you said, having the team trained to also be able to qualify in or out when, yep, they do fit that profile. Or no, actually, we're not the right fit for them. And even though we want to say yes, and I always struggle with the no, it creates 10 times more work in the long run. And yeah, like you said, you always shoot yourself afterwards and go, can't believe I said yes.
Yeah, exactly. And those clients
Yeah.
that come up where you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said yes to this. It's a two-way street. Like they
Yes.
need to choose
Yeah.
you, but you need to choose them
Yeah.
as well, right? And it is funny that 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 use of words can be very powerful. And you talk about this a lot around aligning your sales and your marketing. Definitely make sure that they're aligned to the end goal. I think that is a huge difference as well.
I agree. So is there anything, like, we've covered quite a bit of ground on, building capability for professional services, some of the factors that are different for professional services. You've talked about a little bit about what we can sort of learn from some of the other industries or B2C coming into B2B. Is there anything you feel like you just really would love to get across to someone from professional services listening, or they're going to be screaming at us right now going, you haven't covered this? Is there any sort of real biggie that you feel like we've not covered?
Yeah, I would say, like, be okay with failure and take a risk. Like, I know that, in a lot of these sort of firms or organizations, they're too scared to make changes. So, even the lack of technology investment across all professional services, or the majority, they might be focusing on AI or, one pocket, but not end to end. Work on your tech strategy. Like that would be your thing. But with it, you have to acknowledge that you might not get it perfect straight away. And I really think that risk of failure is the one thing that's holding a lot of professional services firms back, because they would much prefer, the pain of same than the pain of change. And that to me is probably where professional services is falling so far behind both B2C and B2B.
It's interesting. I really like and resonate with something that Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist, said of think like a scientist. A scientist has a hypothesis,
Yes.
but they look at the indicators of success and the indicators of failure. So have a hypothesis of, this is the tech stack we think is going to work, and this is what we think it's going to do. This is the efficiencies and productivity gains and what other gains we think it's going to have. But this is how we're actually going to take that unbiased approach and look for indicators it's working, or indicators of actually maybe that's not quite the right fit and we need to tweak that one.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that with like the professional services is that, like, I'm sorry to say this, it's not going to be the partners that know the best way forward on this. It's going to be someone that knows about technology, that can apply a sales cycle to that whole tech ecosystem, and then create a change management program to essentially change the way that sales are conducted within professional services. Because if it just continues the way it is, you're just going to be outdated, and you're going to take up so much more unnecessary time away from your clients and prospects, because you don't have, a lot of potential automation that could be there, replacing what you're doing. And just instead of using these outdated CRMs as address books. Yeah, I just think it's the biggest gap across all professional services at the moment.
I agree. And I've got to ask you a final question on this is, I think what's really interesting around what Grant Thornton have done is, in your sort of relatively new role, and congrats on your promotion, you've now become the head of revenue operations. And there's this massive movement. I think it was Gartner who said 75% of the world's highest growth organizations by, next year are going to start to have that RevOps model, and they're bringing together, breaking down the silos between, okay, your delivery, your sales, your marketing, your whatever it is, ops. They're sort of creating that sort of more RevOps model. Do you think that to achieve what you just talked about, actually, you need to also consider some of that model of having someone like yourself who kind of leads the charge with the fantastic team you have around you, so that you've got that dedicated person who's owning it?
Yeah, yes. And I think that, short answer, yes. Long answer. So I think that I'm probably the only one that was historically in sales enablement as well. So when we think about this, we're probably ahead by many years, if I'm frank. But it doesn't mean that firms can't leapfrog to it, right? Like they're focusing on utilization and billables. They've got pricing teams that help ensure profitability. Like they might have pockets of that sort of stuff. They might be working on their, digital marketing, like technology adoption, or their CRM, but not both. They've got their marketing team over here and then their business development team over here. Like the ability to bring it all, and like I don't own all pieces at all. I own one little bit that complements other teams that do a lot of the heavy lifting. But what we're trying to do is, yes, create that efficiency there, right? So like if professional services firms truly wanted to make a change, I would say that they need to stop with these massive teams. Again, this is probably going to be offensive. These massive teams and no tech. I think that is an absolute waste. It needs to be like an investment in tech and investment in the right people. And there's like professional services, marketing, business development. There is some absolute cracking talent across the whole industry. It is the hardest thing to market. Like if you're doing marketing for professional services, it's not necessarily sexy. It's technical and it's hard. So there are these brilliant people in there that probably can do so much more and deliver so much more than they're currently delivering, if there was the opportunity of having like automation, for example. So I think that you could even look at your own teams and be like, how can we do something differently? Or yes, bring in someone to be able to look end to end and start building it out. Now with RevOps, I wouldn't have been able to get to the point of where I am today without building things first. So you need to build the infrastructure, you need to build the behavior, you need to create a level of change in culture and adoption across the firm before we can get to that layer. And I think that, so if you do it as like stepping stones, there's absolutely an opportunity. And we're seeing it in pockets within law. There's this wonderful law firm that are doing really exciting things right now in this space. So I'm really excited to see what they do. And we're obviously seeing that parts of this already exist in like your big consulting firms, right? But consistently not. So I think that there is this opportunity for a whole industry to uplift and leverage the talent that's already there, because there's so much talent within there. And I think that it creates a really great opportunity for for up and coming professionals that want to do something different, that want to create a legacy within this industry, like I do.
Yeah. Well said. I kind of again want a round of applause. I just want to applause on this one. I know I'm going to let you go because we've sort of pretty much at time, but I have to ask you a really unfair question last, mainly because you're an avid book reader like I am. So I have to ask you the most unfair question, which is, what is your favorite book? Or actually, if I rephrase, what would be your book recommendation for someone in professional services who's inspired what you've said and they're like, ooh, yeah, I need to dig into a good book on this?
All right.
It's like asking your favorite child. This is why I had to have one child. Picking your favorite book, I can't do it.
I can't pick a favorite book, but I can pick the book that should probably be read first. And it's, every salesperson is going to be laughing at me for this, but it's the Challenger Sale. If you read that first in professional services, because you wouldn't have any exposure to it, I would read that. And then I'd probably read Nudge, which is a really good book. They're probably the first two, and then I would probably go with something like Actually, I've just had a mental blank. I can't even think of a third. But yeah, I would probably start with challenger sale, just so you can understand the different types of sales behaviors. A lot generally go for that relationship seller.
Yeah.
So if you can understand that, I think that would lead you on your way to applying sales in professional services.
Regan, you have been absolutely incredible and so
Likewise.
generous with your knowledge. Thank you so, so much for joining us. We'll put a link to Regan's LinkedIn, and we've already heard she's a fan, in the show notes. So if you want to connect with Regan, you'll be able to find and connect with her there. And Regan, thank you so, so much again. I've loved the honesty. I've loved all the insights. It's been amazing.
I've probably offended far too many professional services experts, but Abby, it's always lovely to chat. Thank you.
If you have not subscribed to the Redefining Sales podcast, please do so that you never miss an episode, because we have spent quite a lot of time recording lots of new exciting interviews for you. So make sure you are the first to listen.